What is a tariff and why it matters for a specific country?
The tariffs a country imposes for meeting their budgetary needs.
How is trade fragmentation is happening? What is the solution for that? And how are we heading towards it?
Not sure if I'll go that far in today's trading scenario. The United States, China, and the European. They are the world's leading exporters and importers.
Firstly, internal economic growth.
Each one of them deviating from the WTO rules. WTO rules themselves should be made more flexible, strengthened in certain areas. Now, the world is in a flux. We have to see where this is taking us.
Does higher tariff rate, how does it juggles between the economic growth of the country and the world per se?
India had perforce to keep the tariff levels somewhat higher to be able to protect its domestic industry.
Yes.
And I think India has been very unfairly targeted for the wrong reasons, and many of the facts put out have been very one-sided.
So, but why India is not opening its market for US?
Only about 60% of our imports were able to be financed with exports. If we liberalize the customs duties further, this balance of trade could widen.
Because we all know that protectionism is an antithesis to globalization as well. What is the solution for that?
Revolutionary steps taken by President Trump. What impact it will have on the US economy itself remains a big question.
I have to maintain my relations with US because I would want my technology to be good. I would want the manufacturing to grow in my country. I have to even think of the two elephants in the room which are there, which is US and China, both of them. What are those 5 key principles of being a good negotiator?
A negotiator will be better armed if, even as he is negotiating with the other side, he is negotiating internally.
Any advice to the current batch of officers or people who are coming in the Indian civil services?
I would hesitate to do that. Pretty much I enjoyed too.
Thank you, sir. Trade is something which is a very complicated concept, sir. So to understand, firstly, the Indo-US relation, that the war that is going, firstly, I would appreciate that we get the basic meaning of what is a tariff and why it matters for a specific country. So, sir, on that.
You see, tariffs is what normally a country imposes at the border for imports into the country. It is based on the normally customs value of the product. It could be also otherwise. And it has two purposes broadly.
All right.
One of which is to give the domestic like industry a certain degree of protection from imports.
Okay.
So it depends from each country to country and depends on product.
Okay.
Like India may have a tariff which is low for certain products which are raw materials, maybe slightly higher for finished products or intermediate products. The second purpose that tariff serves is in terms of revenue.
All right.
Because particularly developing countries which do not have so much of revenue from other forms of taxation rely upon also customs revenue for meeting their budgetary needs.
Yes.
So over a period of time, countries have used this tool for both these objectives. And as you develop more, you tend to use it less for revenue purposes. And also, you tend to use it less for protecting your industry, because the assumption is, as you have developed, you will also become more competitive in certain areas.
Yes.
And there are areas that you are not competitive. You can afford imports to come in those areas.
Yes.
So tariffs have traditionally been used in this fashion. And of course, there are certain rules governing tariffs under the WTO.
Yes.
Uh, I'm not going to go into all the rules governing them, but two basic rules, I would say, is that one, you will have to be non-discriminatory. You cannot impose a tariff towards one WTO member, a certain tariff, and another tariff for another WTO member. Uh, the other thing is, every country, as per the WTO, has bound itself in terms of what tariff it will have for each product. It's in the tariff schedule of each country. Of course, that's maybe certain items which are also unbound.
Yes.
And these are progressively liberalized during various rounds of negotiations. The second aspect is that what I mentioned to you, that these tariffs uh, are progressively liberalized. And India has also been doing this. Our tariffs were relatively high at one point of time. And at that time, India was also enabled to do that because we had balance of payments problems. To be able to restrict imports, to address that issue, we had to have certain quantitative restrictions. So this is different from tariff. We placed some quantitative restrictions on amount of imports it could come. But we lost a WTO case in the late 90s,
Okay.
and therefore we had to do away with these quantitative restrictions. And we could only deal with regulate imports on the basis of tariffs as per our tariff schedule, which we have been doing. And we have also, over a period of time, reduced our tariffs significantly. Uh, so I think this is what I
Yes.
would answer. The only exception to these provisions are when countries enter into free trade agreements,
Yes.
because this non-discrimination is only vis-a-vis WTO members with which we do not have a free trade agreement. But if we have a free trade agreement, that enables countries to liberalize their trade substantively. It meant eliminate trade. In fact, that would be, there are certain conditions in WTO agreements for it to qualify as a
As a
free trade
FTA.
agreement.
Yes.
So if we meet those requirements and it is concluded, then of course with those countries we charge tariff or zero tariff, for example, depending on the schedule of the FTA.
Yes.
So these are the basic,
Of what a tariff
yeah,
is.
on the tariff issue.
Yes, sir. The follow-up question on the same is, does higher tariff limit, does the higher tariff rate impact the Indian economic growth? Because our Indian economy, let's say for us, Indian economy, we can grow in two ways. Firstly, internal economic growth, and secondly, how the international economy affects our economy. So, on that regard, does higher tariff rate, how does it juggles between the economic growth
Okay.
of the country and the world per se?
See, as I mentioned to you, we have had a certain history in terms of tariffs for the different reasons that I
Yes.
mentioned: balance of payments ground, to help develop domestic industry grow, and also to be able for tariffs to contribute a certain degree of revenue. Now, uh, we still have somewhat higher level of tariffs compared to other countries.
Yes.
This is one complaint that certain other countries
Ha-
often convey to us, as President Trump himself conveyed at some point of time. This is something that needs to be certainly kept in view. At the same time, What has happened in the last 2, 3 decades is a new phenomenon that we have had to face with. These are relatively cheap imports coming from China
Okay.
and non-market economies. Now, China is also a WTO member, and we cannot impose a particular tariff on China and another tariff for somebody else.
Yes.
So, we have to keep that in mind. There is a provision for levying anti-dumping duty
Yes.
or a countervailing duty if China is seen to be giving subsidies, or if Chinese exporters are dumping goods into Indian product, there are provisions. But not always they work, and you have to conduct investigations for those such levying such duties.
Yes.
They also take time. By the time the industry may get affected. So there are certain trade remedy measures available, but they may not be adequate,
Okay.
which is why India had perforce to keep the tariff level somewhat higher to be able to protect its domestic industry.
Yes.
In fact, in some ways,
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Trump, the president, is justifying what we have been doing. He is levying higher tariffs on national security grounds, on economic security grounds. And that is precisely what we were doing.
Okay.
But that said, to keep tariffs at a high level for a relatively long period uh, gives a certain level of complacency to domestic industry.
All right.
They do not develop further to be competitive. So government has to juggle, as you rightly mentioned, these two elements
Yes.
and see how best to ensure on the one hand that the domestic industry becomes more competitive,
Yes.
and at the same time it is able to protect its industry from unfair
Trade.
infusion of imports. This is a constant struggle, but this is something that the government has to do.
All right. So but why India is not is not opening its market for US when it comes to agriculture and dairy products? Like, what are the key reasons behind doing that?
You see, another aspect which I should also highlight here is even with the present level of tariffs, India's imports far exceed exports. Our merchandise goods exports last year were of the order of about 720 billion. Our exports were of the order of 440 billion.
Mm-hmm.
So, in a sense, only about 60% of our imports were able to be financed with exports.
Exports.
So, imagine if we liberalize the customs duties further, this balance of trade could widen. A situation that's not very different from that of the United States. So, if there is one country which should understand our predicament better than anybody else, it should be the United States, which is also facing a similar situation in terms of its balance of trade on
Mm-hmm.
merchandise goods, which is why now they are on economic security grounds increasing their tariffs. I am not justifying that because they are violating WTO rules, whereas we are still staying within our bound rates of duties. So
Mm-hmm.
we are not violating WTO rules, but we are taking these measures for the reasons that I have mentioned. You have talked about agricultural
Yes,
goods.
agriculture and dairy products.
Yes, these are as very special areas in India, which is somewhat unique. If you go to Western countries or even certain of the developing countries like Brazil, Argentina, etc., agriculture is somewhat differently organized,
Mhm.
where the farmers are fairly large in relative terms.
Yes.
Whereas in India, there is this small scale farmers, and most of them are small scale farmers, or what you call marginal farmers.
Yes.
And they basically grow their crops partly for their own consumption, and the surplus they sell in the market. Now, it is for the farmer a case of livelihood depending on the small farm. So, from that point of view, I think our situation is slightly different.
Okay.
And which is why we are saying we are ready to look at certain uh, areas in terms of merchandise goods, in industrial products, non-agricultural products, etc., where we will be open to liberalizing our tariffs with the US. But on certain goods on which uh, you know the farmers are of the kind that I mentioned are very dependent on their farm income. It will be very, very difficult for us to liberalize further, because this would mean import of those products in a fairly large way, which will make their products uncompetitive, and which may even threaten their livelihood. So, this is we are looking at it more from the point of view of livelihood security.
All right, because it's majorly an agrarian.
Agriculture, and because of the kind of level of ownership that we have in our farming community, because almost 40 to 45% of our uh, rural landscape farmers are dependent directly on
Yes.
agriculture. Whereas if you go to developed countries, their farmer population will be about 2 to 3% of their population. So they are more based on commercial agriculture, which is very different from our case.
Yes, sir. So, but for example, like uh, going away from the topic, for example, right now, every country in this world is taking a protectionism, the theory that we call the doctrine of protectionism, where I am only thinking of my interest. कि मेरा interest क्या है उस चीज में. So how does, because we all know that protectionism is an antithesis to globalization as well. So on that take, how is trade fragmentation is happening? Because what is the solution for that? And how are we heading towards it? So because India and US is a different topic altogether, but to get the basics clear, how do we put these two things which are anomalies to each other? How do we put them in one tray and then solve the problem which is there?
You see, you have to understand what's happening in the world today. Uh, we have the WTO rules, where there are very clear principles about non-discrimination, about national treatment, about countries should not be exceeding their bound tariff rate commitments, etc. Uh, on the one hand, it is certainly arguable that these rules have not been adequate to deal with the evolving trade situation, particularly with the uh, you know coming into play by certain non-market economies
Yes.
who follow practices which are somewhat opaque, are not totally clear about their subsidies, their state aiding enterprise roles, etc. In fact, the WTO Secretariat report about the trade policy reviews of certain countries are also evidence to this effect. So, there is certainly that aspect that needs to be kept in view. Second, if you look at the three major players in today's trading scenario, the United States, China, and the European Union.
Correct.
They are the world's leading exporters and importers, uh, and together they contribute a little over 40%
Yes.
of world exports or imports. And they are, each one of them, deviating from the WTO rules in their own way, and as you rightly mentioned, to protect and promote their interests.
Yes.
In the process, the WTO rules are getting undermined. And unfortunately, the dispute settlement system of the WTO is not at the moment uh, active in the appellate body stage. Uh, so it is dormant effectively. It is not able to adjudicate and give a clear view as to what is right and what is wrong. So, in the absence of such a system, these countries are taking actions to promote their own interests. Now, the world is in a flux. We have to see where this is taking us. At the same time, countries are also trying to protect their interests, uh, firstly, in terms of trying to conclude more free trade agreements with other partners uh, with whom they have share a certain level of, you can say, understanding
Yes.
and trust. So that is happening. And we in India are also trying to conclude free trade agreements with more partners, which we can build further trade relationship.
Yes.
So that is the first track. The secondly, even with the United States, which is now taking a somewhat different approach, countries are still trying to protect their interests by trying to see if they can come to some bilateral trade deals with the United States, because all said and done, US is the world's largest market. It imports, as I mentioned earlier, about $3.3 trillion. And countries do not want to lose that market or market shares. So they are trying their best, even as it does go against WTO principles, but they are trying to come to a deal. Now, so in a sense, the world is, you use the word fragmenting. I'm not sure if I'll go that far, but certainly the uh, trends don't look very positive from the point of view of observance of WTO rules. So, whether WTO rules themselves should be made more flexible, strengthened in certain areas, uh, expanded in certain areas, those are all questions that become fundamental today. But all that require a certain degree of consensus among countries involved, and that do not seem to exist today. These majors, trade majors particularly, uh, the US is taking the tariff option. China is creating its own model,
Yes.
in even going to the extent of weaponizing its dominance in certain sectors. And EU is taking the regulatory route, including through carbon border adjustment mechanism, etc. So we have to see how we can bring all these diverging trends, and will the dust settle down, and will we be able to create a system that can manage all these diverging trends, and bring the world to some revived or strengthened system of WTO, remains to be seen. There is a ministerial of the WTO due to take place in Cameroon in March next year.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Whether that will take us forward in that direction
Yes.
is again a question that remains to be seen.
you're ending with a question. I would want to put that question again, that as because we all can understand that it affects the legitimacy and efficacy of WTO as well, as the current Indo-US war, the tariff war which is going on, initiated by President Donald Trump. So it definitely affects the efficacy of WTO, where the founding cornerstone of that particular organization was GATT, General Agreement on Trade and Tariffs. So, sir, how do you put that? How do you see that countries are going to maneuver around? Is it the end, or are we going towards a third world war, probably something like that?
No, no, I would not yet visualize uh, developments on those lines, at least not yet. Yes, trade is going through some tension,
Yes.
some tortuous times, trying times. Uh, we will have to wait and see how things develop. There have been certain uh, suggestions floated, including by the present USTR and the former USTR, in terms of how they would like to shift the existing basis for WTO,
Okay.
which is not only the principles that I mentioned earlier, but also in terms of uh, comparative advantage. That's the economic basis, which helped globalization thrive. They are now looking at a system where there is more balanced trade. Rebalancing is getting emphasis. Now, whether that is a sustainable concept, economically, will it work? We do not know.
Okay.
In fact, many are wondering if the revolutionary steps taken by President Trump and in terms of getting what impact it will have on the US economy itself remains a big question. So I think many will want to see the impact in the coming months
Mm-hmm.
and whether that will give some answers.
All right.
You are also aware that there is also a dispute raised in the US Supreme Court. It has reached the level of
Yes.
US Supreme Court now, which is going to adjudicate whether President Trump has the power to use the International Economic Emergency Powers Act to invoke these reciprocal tariffs, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, that again, the hearing will take place in November, and a finding, a conclusion and a decision by the Supreme Court will be available soon thereafter.
Yes, sir.
So all these are evolving developments. So we cannot have definitive answers at this stage.
Definitely, sir.
We will have to wait for how these developments play out, and then see how we can take forward. But meanwhile, I would certainly urge that we should continue to making efforts to see if we can get the bilateral trade agreement done with the United States, if it is still possible. Because yes, this have been very unfortunate, and I think India has been very unfairly targeted for the wrong reasons, and many of the facts put out have been very one-sided, and that's not the correct appreciation of facts. But that said, at the end of the day, they are negotiating. When they are negotiating, they are going to put up whatever they think is right. We have to negotiate, and our idea is not to make argument for an argument, but to see if we can successfully arrive at a mutually agreeable solution. So I think that's what our team is very much involved at.
Yes.
We have kept the temperature low, at least on our side, and trying to see if we can push forward a solution that takes care of our interests, but also meets the US interests to the extent we can.
That's very well answered, sir. Coming back to the Indian position, India and other countries which are middle economies of the, or the developing economies of the world, they have to even think of the two elephants in the room which are there, which are mowing and which are the gladiators at this point of time, which is US and China, both of them. So the tension between them, the turbulence between them, is it a ideological rivalry, or is it a economic rivalry, or let's say even if it is either of them, how does it impact countries like us? Because we have to have a very balanced situation with them. For example, I have to maintain my relations with US because I would want my technology to be good, I would want the manufacturing to grow in my country. And with China, because it's like a strangle in the supply chain, it has to be my relationship with China has to be good as well. So how do you see the implication first, and secondly, whether it is a economic or a ideological rivalry between both of them?
Whether it is an economic ideological rivalry, uh, I don't uh, have a very clear view on this.
Okay.
China was admitted into the United World Trade Organization in 2001. There was an expectation that over a period of time it will turn into a market economy, and it will be a more open economy. While China would certainly claim today that it's a more market oriented economy and open, but not all countries may agree with that proposition. So there is that problem, and China itself makes a claim that it's a socialist economy with Chinese characteristics, socialist market economy with Chinese characteristics. But that said, there are issues there about the high level of subsidization that has taken place there, some of the practices that they have used in terms of acquiring a very, very strong position in several of the sectors, a dominant position, in fact, be it in critical minerals, magnets, uh, or even in terms of steel, iron, and several other strategic areas. Uh, so there are issues there, and as I mentioned, even the WTO trade policy review of China last year had commented on some of their subsidy notifications and so on. There are ideological issues. I'm not sure if it is a ideology about communism, etc. If that is what you are referring to, because China was admitted into the WTO. But certainly there is a geopolitical and geo-economic contestation. That is, there is no doubt about it, and they themselves have talked about it. So, economic security and what China's eventual technology dominance in these sectors would do is a cause of concern in the United States. And this is resulting, for example, in the number of export controls, technology controls that US is imposing on some of these advanced chips exports to China, etc. So these are very clear indicators that there are areas of concern for the United States vis-a-vis China. Uh, how these issues will get resolved eventually remains to be seen, because US and China are also engaged in
Yes.
negotiations, and they have been able to arrive at some you can say arrangements,
Mm-hmm.
even as US continues to levy a certain level of tariff on imports from China, and China is also reciprocating. But they have also arrived at some kind of a deal, for example, on TikTok uh, recently, on how the ownership of TikTok in the US will be taken forward and so on. And they have to arrive at an agreement on more issues. I understand before 90 days, I think from August 12th. So it will be in 3 months or in 2 months from now. They will have to arrive, or maybe further postpone that.
Yes.
And the leaders, that is President Xi Jinping and President Trump, are also to meet on the sidelines, maybe next month of some international meeting. Now, all these are developments that are taking place, and no, I think, specific conclusion can be taken at the moment of time in terms of what they may arrive at, how this issue will get resolved, etc. But the fact remains that there is the element of geo-economic contestation and geopolitical implications thereof, which are very much at play.
Sir, drifting apart from the conversation that we were supposed to, something that I'll be personally interested, and I think the viewers would want to have a personal outlook to the question basically. We all negotiate in our personal lives as well, like on day-to-day basis with our parents, let's say in a meeting, with our teachers and everything. So what are those five principles that you would suggest every student or every viewer that is viewing this episode, that what are those five key principles of being a good negotiator?
I'm not sure if I can number them, but certainly I think you have to understand the subject first very well. What are the issues that you're talking about? And secondly, you must be very clear
Mhm.
what are your objectives. And when I say objectives, you should have a twofold idea. What is it that I would like to have as the final conclusion, and what are my bottom lines? You should be very clear, because you would not like to, you know, give up any of those bottom lines. That's you must be very clear about. The next is, just as you are aware of your own bottom lines and your own wish list, you must also have a clear idea about the other side's objectives. Of course, they are not going to tell you their bottom lines, but you should be able to make an intelligent guess. And you should also be able to make an intelligent guess about their vulnerabilities,
Yes.
because this is very, very important. But fourthly, I would say that the idea of a negotiation is not a debate. It is not a lawyers arguing before a judge, where he or she has to win the case for his side. Here, you would arrive at a final result better if you are able to show that you appreciate the other side's concerns,
Mm.
and you are also able to convey your concerns fairly, substantively to the other side. See if the two can have some meeting point somewhere.
Yes.
And I have seen even like, for example, if somebody asked this question to me about the Indian dairy sector, Indian farmer sector,
Mm.
the first thing I would do is invite the delegation to India,
Yes.
meet some of the farmers,
Yes.
meet some of our agriculture, meet some of our dairy farmers, look for themselves what uh, could be the situation if there is a flood of adverse imports. So it is a way of, that's why they call these rounds of negotiations. So these are not just on the negotiating table, but also in terms of visiting each other's country, seeing for themselves firsthand, uh, and getting exposed to what are the difficulties that each side face. and then try to explore if we can find a common ground, which can be a win-win for both.
Both.
And finally, uh, a negotiation like a trade agreement
Mhm.
is not just for today. It is for the next 5 years, 10 years beyond.
Mhm.
So you have to really look at the future and see how it will play out. And I'm sure the other side will also do the same. But that's very, very important. To simply be seen as getting over today's problem. But if that lands us in another problem 2 years down the line,
It
that's
will.
not a great idea. So these are other issues that you need to keep in mind. And lastly, a negotiator will be better armed
Hmm.
if, even as he is negotiating with the other side, he is negotiating internally
Yes.
with his own industry, with his own farmers association, periodically updating them constantly about what is the progress
Hmm.
in the negotiation, getting their feedback, because they will be giving very, very interesting information which you would be otherwise not having. Those again will be useful in the negotiations.
Yes.
So these are all aspects that will come into play during a negotiation. And to the extent you can bring it all in to make the final product, I think it will be more enduring.
Yes. That's very well elaborated. Some of the books that you would recommend students who want to pursue like their career in this field, especially the related to international trade, international relations, and you'll have to mention your book as well.
No, you are talking about books.
Books recommendations.
No, no, certainly there are several books which have come out. I mean, my book is focused more on free trade agreements.
Yes.
In fact, there I have talked about uh, free trade agreements, what has happened internationally,
Yes.
and how it is evolved globally,
Yes.
and then try to look at the two. This basically the sum and substance of the
Yes.
book. And I'm not negotiated any free trade agreements. I was there at the time when the Doha round negotiations were at travail. So I was a party to some of the negotiations on industrial market access and so
Mhm.
on. But it's quite challenging, these negotiations. There is in fact another book. A good friend of mine, Professor Abhijit Das, has written a book this year. It's again released by the Oxford University Press on negotiation strategies, etc.
Okay.
This is another book that has of this genre. I'm sure there are several other
Or
books.
any of your favorite books. It need not be related to international trade or something, but any three, four books that you would want every student to read.
No, no, there are several books which, in fact, I think even Mr. Lighthizer, I understand, has written a book that our you know, trade policy enthusiasts should be reading. Likewise, there are other books, but I will not be able to offhand
I
recommend to you more.
Yes. And sir, to sum it all up, any advice to the current batch of officers or people who are coming in the Indian, basically Indian civil services, to all of them, you would want to say something?
I would hesitate to do that because today's context is very different from the context when we entered the civil service. It's far more challenging. Uh, India, it is uh, now the fifth largest economy,
Yes.
and if all goes well, we should be the third largest in a few years' time. And we are also aspiring to become a more developed nation in 2 decades' time. So let's hope all that comes through. but the responsibility for getting all that done rests on the present generation of officers.
Yes.
This is a huge responsibility. And that is something that will require a lot more work. It's a lot more challenging. Uh, and understanding the various cross currents, the interplay between trade, diplomacy, technology, uh, capital, whole lot of issues, uh, which were not to the extent intertwined during our days. So that's why I said I hesitate to give any specific advice, but to say that it will be a lot more challenging, and I wish them all the very best.
Thank you so much, sir. I think it was a pleasure talking to you, and it is my with lot of profuse excitement and appreciation. Thank you so much for taking our time. It means
Thank
a
you
lot.
very much. I
Yes.
enjoyed too.
Thank you, sir.